The room went quiet when the CEO of a billion-dollar company stood up, clapped slowly and said, "Young lady, you just closed a contract worth $4 million. This changes everything." Wura froze, her heart racing. Just last week, her parents had shouted at her for refusing to scrub the floors before dawn. They laughed whenever she spoke of her dreams, calling her nothing but a maid. But now, every camera lens, every pair of eyes, was on her. She wasn't invisible anymore. And the same family that mocked her was about to be exposed. Wura was the first daughter in her family, but instead of being treated with love and respect, she was treated like a servant. Every morning before the sun came up, her mother's voice would wake her, ordering her to sweep the compound, wash clothes, cook, and even polish her father's shoes. While her younger brothers and sisters sat laughing in the living room or playing outside, Wura carried heavy buckets of water and bent her back over endless chores. She often watched them with a soft smile, but deep down her heart ached. She wanted a life where she could dream too, not just work like a shadow in her own home. Her dream was simple but strong. She wanted to become a business strategist, someone who could plan deals and lead companies into success. But every time she tried to speak about it, her parents shut her down. "Nonsense," her father would say, waving his hand as if her words had no weight. "Your place is in the kitchen. Who needs your foolish dreams?" Her mother would laugh, telling her to forget about books and focus on cooking for her siblings. The words stung more than the heavy chores, but Wura never argued. She held her pain quietly inside her heart, letting it fuel her in silence. At night, when her body felt broken from scrubbing and washing, she would sit by herself, watching the stars through the window of her small room. Sometimes she whispered her dreams aloud, imagining herself in a room filled with leaders, her voice commanding respect. But in the real world, she was only the girl with cracked hands from too much soap, the girl her family called the maid of the house. No one asked about her wishes. No one cared about the fire burning inside her. Still, Wura refused to let her spirit break. Every insult became a stone she stacked quietly inside her, building a foundation of strength. She told herself that one day, all these burdens would not crush her. They would push her higher. For now, she carried on, washing, cleaning, cooking, and serving, but her heart never stopped whispering, "I am meant for more." When the whole house finally became quiet at night, Wura would wipe her tired hands on her wrapper and slip into her tiny room. Her body begged her to lie down and sleep, but her mind refused to rest. On the small wooden table sat an old laptop, its screen cracked across the corner. It was a gift from Abio, her cousin, the only person who ever believed in her. While others laughed at her dreams, Abio had looked at her and said, "You have something special. Don't stop." Those words lived in her heart, giving her the courage to keep going. She would sit on a low stool, her back still aching from hours of chores, and open the laptop. The screen flickered, but she didn't mind. She searched for business plans, contracts, and strategies, reading slowly, taking notes with a short pencil on worn-out paper. The little light from her lamp barely lit the room, but Wura's eyes stayed wide awake. She whispered the words as she read, repeating them again and again until they stuck in her memory. Some nights, her siblings would laugh loudly in the next room, watching movies or playing games, while she bent her head over diagrams and charts. She didn't envy them. She only thought of the future she was building in secret, a future where she would no longer be invisible. The weight of her sacrifices pressed heavily on her, but she carried it with patience, knowing each night of study was one step closer to freedom. There were times she fell asleep over the laptop, her head resting on the keyboard. She would wake up suddenly, wipe her eyes, and continue reading. Her stomach often rumbled with hunger because she had given her share of food to her younger siblings, but even then she pressed on. She believed knowledge was the bread that would fill her one day. Wura studied case studies of big companies, learning how they won contracts and built empires. She practiced writing her own strategies, imagining herself standing in front of people and presenting bold ideas. The world outside saw her as nothing more than a housemaid, but inside her small room, she was training to become the strategist she dreamed of. Her sacrifices were silent, hidden from her parents who would never understand. Yet every word she read, every plan she wrote, became a seed of hope. Alone in the quiet night, Wura was building a future no one else could see. The dining table was full that evening. Relatives had come to visit, and the house was noisy with laughter, clinking plates, and the smell of food. Wura moved around serving everyone, quietly placing dishes in front of her parents, uncles, and siblings. She sat at the corner, almost invisible as usual. But inside her heart something kept pushing. Maybe this was her chance to speak. She had been reading and learning in secret for so long, and the words were ready to come out. As the conversations went on about money, businesses, and success, Wura finally gathered courage. She cleared her throat softly and said, "I have been working on an idea. I think I can start a consulting service, something to help companies negotiate better contracts and grow faster." Her voice was steady but hopeful, her eyes shining with a small spark of belief. For a moment, there was silence. Then her younger brother burst out laughing so hard he almost spilled his drink. "You? Consulting companies," he mocked, holding his stomach. Her sisters joined in, covering their mouths as they laughed louder. Even her father shook his head with a smirk, as if she had just told the funniest joke. Her mother's voice came sharp and dismissive. "Wura, you can't even finish sweeping this house properly, and now you're talking about business? Please don't disgrace us." The laughter spread around the table. Some relatives whispered to each other, exchanging amused looks, while others chuckled openly. Wura sat still, forcing herself not to cry. Each laugh pierced her chest, but she kept her face calm. Inside, her heart screamed, "Why can't they see what I see? Why do they only see me as a maid?" Her uncle, trying to join the joke, said, "Maybe she'll start a consulting service for washing plates and scrubbing floors." The table roared with more laughter. Wura's hands tightened under the table, her nails pressing into her palm. She swallowed the lump in her throat and tried to smile faintly, but her spirit felt crushed in that moment. Yet as painful as it was, she also felt something awaken inside her. Their mockery did not kill her dream. It only pushed it deeper into her heart like a seed covered in soil. She thought to herself, "They may laugh today, but one day, these same mouths will be silent when I prove them wrong." That night at the dinner table, Wura was humiliated in front of everyone. But in silence she made a vow to herself. Their laughter would become her fuel, and she would never forget the way they looked at her as if she was nothing. After the painful night at the dinner table, Wura carried the sound of their laughter in her heart like a wound. But instead of letting it weaken her, she turned it into strength. She told herself she would prove them wrong. Late one evening, as the house settled into sleep, she sat at her little desk with the cracked laptop glowing faintly. On the screen was an advertisement for a nationwide business competition. It was calling for young minds with innovative ideas in contract, negotiation, and business growth. The winner would gain recognition, mentorship, and the chance to secure life-changing contracts. Wura's heart raced as she read the details again and again. This was exactly what she had been preparing for in secret all these years. It felt like the door she had been praying for was finally opening. But she also knew her family well. If they discovered she was applying, they would mock her again, maybe even stop her completely. So she kept everything hidden, working quietly at night when no one was watching. She drafted her proposal carefully, using every bit of knowledge she had gathered from late-night studies. She outlined strategies for small and medium businesses to win contracts against larger competitors, offering fresh negotiation tactics that could save companies millions. Each word she typed carried her hope and determination. Sometimes the laptop froze, forcing her to start again, but she never gave up. She wiped sweat from her face, whispered small prayers, and continued typing. Her cousin Abio had once told her, "Don't wait for anyone to believe in you. Just start." Remembering his words, she pressed on until the application form was complete. When she reached the final page and clicked submit, her hands trembled. A confirmation message appeared, and Wura let out a deep breath. She had done it. The next morning, her mother shouted for her to fetch water and scrub the compound, and her father reminded her to prepare food for her siblings. Wura obeyed quietly, keeping her secret locked inside her heart. No one in the house knew that while they saw her as a maid, she had just planted the seed of her future. At night, she lay on her bed staring at the ceiling, imagining what it would feel like to stand in front of business leaders, sharing her ideas with confidence. She whispered to herself, "One day, they will know who I am." For now, the secret was hers alone, but it was the beginning of everything she had ever dreamed of. The morning started like every other one in Wura's house. She was on her knees scrubbing the floors, her hands already sore from the endless chores. The smell of soap filled the air as she worked quickly before her mother came in to complain. Just as she pushed the rag across the floor, her old phone buzzed loudly on the table. For a moment she froze. Hardly anyone ever called her, and most times it was only Abio checking on her. She quickly wiped her wet hands on her wrapper and reached for it. When she saw the unknown number flashing on the screen, her heart skipped. With a shaky breath she answered softly, "Hello." The voice on the other end was warm and professional. "Good morning, is this Miss Wura Adeola? We're calling from the National Business Competition Board. Congratulations, you've been shortlisted as one of our finalists. Please check your email for the official invitation." Wura's eyes widened, and her chest tightened with joy. She almost dropped the phone. For a second, she couldn't even breathe. She wanted to scream, to dance, to cry all at once. But before she could say anything, her mother's voice came from the kitchen. "Who is calling you this early? Better not be wasting time on nonsense when there's still work to do." Her heart raced. Quickly, Wura covered her mouth to stop the smile from breaking through and forced her voice to sound dull. "Ah, it was just a wrong number," she said, lowering her head as if nothing important had happened. Her mother grumbled and went back to cooking, not suspecting anything. Wura pressed the phone close to her chest, her whole body shaking with excitement. She hurried back to scrubbing the floor, but her hands moved faster, her mind lost in the words she had just heard. Finalist. Shortlisted. Official invitation. The words echoed inside her like music she had been waiting her whole life to hear. Later, when she was alone in her room, she opened her cracked laptop and checked her email. There it was, the official message with her name written boldly, inviting her to the finals. Tears filled her eyes as she read every line carefully. She whispered, "Thank you, God," her voice breaking with relief. That night, she lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to tell Abio immediately, but she decided to wait until she had more details. For now, it was her little secret. She hugged her pillow tight, smiling to herself. In the middle of a life filled with chores and insults, a door had finally opened for her. And no one in the house knew how close she was to changing everything. The day of the competition finally came, and Wura's heart felt like it would burst out of her chest. She stood in front of the mirror wearing a simple but neat gown that Abio had borrowed for her from a friend. It was not designer or new, but it was the best she had ever worn. She slipped on flat shoes that were slightly loose but still looked good enough. As she looked at herself, she whispered quietly, "This is my moment." The venue was grand, filled with polished marble floors and bright lights that seemed to shine on everyone except her. Around her stood young men and women dressed in expensive suits, carrying the confidence of people who had been raised in wealth. Their shoes sparkled, their watches glistened, and their voices filled the room with easy laughter. Wura walked in carefully, clutching her small file of notes, trying to steady her breathing. She felt out of place, like a stranger in a world too big for her. A few competitors glanced at her simple dress and whispered to each other, some even smirking. But Wura kept her head down, reminding herself that she wasn't here to compete with their clothes. She was here to show her mind. When it was finally her turn to present, she stepped onto the stage, her palms sweating as she held her papers. For a moment, she froze under the bright lights. The faces of the judges and the audience blurred together, and doubt rushed in. She could almost hear her family's laughter echoing in her ears, mocking her again. But then she remembered all those nights of sacrifice, the hunger, the tears, the secret studying. She reminded herself that this was why she had worked so hard. She lifted her chin and began to speak. Her voice started softly, but as she explained her strategies, it grew steadier. She talked about how small businesses could compete with giants by focusing on smarter negotiation tactics. She gave clear steps on saving costs, building partnerships, and turning weaknesses into strengths. She didn't just talk theory. She gave examples, practical and simple, the kind of solutions that could change real businesses. Slowly, the hall grew quiet. The side conversations stopped. The smirks faded from faces. Even the judges leaned forward, their pens pausing in their hands. The more she spoke, the more confident she became, her passion shining through every word. By the time she finished, the silence in the hall was heavy, Not with doubt but with respect. Wura looked around, her chest rising with pride. For the first time in her life, she wasn't invisible. The same girl who scrubbed floors and carried buckets was now standing tall, her words echoing in a hall filled with powerful people. And not a single person was laughing anymore. It was Christmas morning, and the house was alive with noise. Wura's mother shouted instructions from the kitchen, pots clattered, and her siblings ran around in excitement. Her parents had planned a big family feast, and as usual, most of the work was placed on Wura's shoulders. She was expected to sweep the compound, wash the dishes, and help with endless cooking while everyone else enjoyed the holiday. But this Christmas was different. Wura quietly slipped out early, her heart racing as she carried her small bag with her notes. She left behind the heavy list of chores and headed for the event that could change her life. Hours later, her mother noticed the floors were unswept and the dishes still piled high. Anger rose quickly. "Where is that girl?" she snapped, wiping her hands on her wrapper. Her father frowned, realizing Wura was nowhere in sight. They searched her small room and found it empty. Furious, her father shouted, "So she has abandoned her duties on Christmas morning? This girl will not disgrace us." Her siblings snickered, adding fuel, and soon both parents decided to track her down. A neighbor mentioned seeing Wura leave in a borrowed dress, holding a file. Suspicion burned in her mother's eyes. "Let's see what nonsense she is chasing," she muttered. Without wasting time, they left the cooking behind and hurried toward the city center, their anger growing with each step. When they reached the grand venue, they were surprised by the sight of cars lined up, media cameras flashing, and people in fine suits walking in and out. They squeezed past the crowd, asking questions until they found themselves at the back of the great hall. And there, standing under the bright lights, was Wura. Their eyes widened as they watched her, dressed neatly in the borrowed gown, speaking confidently into the microphone. She was not carrying buckets or washing plates. She was on stage, presenting her business strategies to a panel of CEOs, her voice steady, her ideas sharp. The same girl they had called a maid was now commanding the attention of an entire hall. Her father's mouth fell open, unable to form words. Her mother clutched her wrapper tightly, her chest rising and falling as disbelief washed over her. Their anger melted into shock as they saw the crowd listening in silence, nodding at Wura's points. The judges were leaning forward, clearly impressed by her. Cameras clicked, capturing every angle of the moment. For the first time, her parents saw her as more than just the girl who scrubbed floors. They saw someone powerful, someone respected, someone they could no longer ignore. The shame burned in their faces, but they couldn't look away. They had come ready to drag her home. But instead, they stood frozen at the back of the hall, realizing the daughter they had mocked was now shining brighter than they had ever imagined. The air inside the hall was thick with anticipation as the judges finished their deliberations. The audience waited in silence, all eyes fixed on the stage where the leading CEO, a tall man in a sharp suit, stepped forward with a microphone. His voice carried authority, and the moment he began to speak, the room hushed completely. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "today we have witnessed incredible talent. But one presentation stood out above all others. It was bold, it was practical, and it showed a mind ready to transform the business world. That person is Wura Adeola." For a heartbeat, Wura couldn't move. She stood frozen, her eyes wide, her file still clutched to her chest. Then the CEO continued, his words echoing across the hall. "Not only is she the winner of this competition, but she has also secured her first contract, valued at $4 million. Her strategies will be implemented immediately by one of our partner companies. This young woman has proven that intelligence and courage matter more than background or wealth." The hall erupted in thunderous applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Cameras flashed from every corner, capturing her stunned expression, the shock written across her face, and the tears glistening in her eyes. Wura's knees almost gave way as she tried to process what had just happened. $4 million. Her mind repeated the number over and over, unable to believe it was real. She placed a trembling hand over her mouth, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. As the applause grew louder, her parents stood at the back, completely speechless. Her father's jaw hung open while her mother's eyes darted across the hall, trying to make sense of what she was witnessing. The same daughter they had treated like a servant was now being honored by powerful CEOs. Her name ringing across microphones, her image displayed on screens. Every camera seemed to catch not only Wura's glowing face, but also the stunned expressions of her parents, frozen in shame. The CEO walked toward her, shaking her hand firmly. "You are proof that true talent cannot be hidden," he said warmly. His words carried across the room, and the audience responded with another wave of applause. Wura finally found her voice. She bowed slightly and whispered into the microphone, thank you so much." Her voice cracked with emotion, but her confidence shone through. She looked out into the sea of faces and caught sight of her parents. For a brief moment, their eyes met. They looked small, powerless, and embarrassed in a way she had never seen before. This was her million-dollar moment, not just because of the contract, but because the world now saw her for who she truly was. No one could erase this day, and no one could ever silence her again. The night after the event, the house felt strangely quiet. The family sat in the living room, each person pretending to be relaxed, but their eyes kept shifting toward Wura. She had returned home with her head held high. No longer the girl who bent under endless chores. Her parents cleared their throats and began speaking as if nothing had ever been wrong. Her mother smiled too brightly and said, "Wura, you know we are so proud of you. We always knew you had potential. Didn't I always tell you to work hard? See how it has paid off." Her father quickly added, Yes, your mother is right. We only pushed you with chores so that you could be disciplined. You misunderstood us, but in truth, we were shaping you for greatness. Look where it has brought you today." Wura listened quietly, her hands folded in her lap. She could see the desperation in their eyes, the way they tried to rewrite the past so they could share in her victory. Her younger siblings nodded along, acting as if they had never laughed at her dreams. Finally Wura spoke, her voice calm but steady. "You say you supported me? You say you believed in me?" She paused, looking directly at her parents. "Then why did you call my dreams nonsense? Why did you laugh when I spoke of building a business? Why did you make me a maid in my own home while my brothers and sisters played freely? If this was support, then what is mockery?" Her mother shifted uncomfortably, her smile fading. Her father tried to interrupt, but Wura raised her hand gently and continued. "For years, I carried the burden of this house on my shoulders. I washed, cooked, cleaned, and obeyed while you told me I would never become anything. And while you looked down on me, I studied in secret, I worked in silence, and I built my future from the pieces of your rejection. I did it not because of your support but in spite of it." The room grew still. Her siblings looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Her mother's eyes filled with shame, and her father clenched his fists but said nothing. Wura's voice softened, but her words cut deeper than anger could. "You tried to bury me under chores and insults, but you did not realize that you were only watering a seed. I grew, not because you helped me, but because I refused to break. And now, I stand where you never thought I could." Silence hung heavy in the room. For the first time, her parents had no defense. They could not twist the truth anymore, because Wura had spoken it clearly. And she spoke it not with bitterness, but with the calm strength of someone who had finally risen above them. The morning sun poured into Wura's new office, its wide glass windows opening to the city skyline. The space smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely free. The heavy shadow of being treated as nothing more than a maid in her parents' house was gone. She had carved out a world where she was respected, valued, and admired. Abio walked beside her, carrying a bouquet of flowers as a gift for her first day. "This is just the beginning, Wura," he said with a smile. His presence was steady and reassuring, reminding her that not all people were against her. Some truly believed in her light. She placed the flowers on her desk, her nameplate shining boldly, Wura Adelzio. Soon journalists and photographers filled the office for her first official press interview. Cameras flashed, microphones were extended, and the room buzzed with excitement. Wura sat tall, her confidence radiating as she answered each question with grace. Reporters asked about her journey, her struggles, and the moment she knew she had succeeded. She spoke with honesty, but without bitterness, making it clear that her past did not define her. Her determination did. Finally, one journalist asked her, "If you could summarize your story in one message, what would you tell the world?" The room grew quiet. Wura looked directly into the camera, her eyes steady and unshaken. A small, proud smile touched her lips as she said, "They tried to bury me in chores, but I grew roots of ambition. And now, I stand taller than their doubt." The words echoed in the room, powerful and unforgettable. The journalists nodded, scribbling furiously, knowing they had just captured a statement that would go viral. Cameras clicked rapidly, freezing the moment in time. Outside the building, a crowd had gathered, cheering her name, waving banners, and celebrating her as a symbol of strength. Young girls pointed at her with wide eyes, seeing in her a reflection of what they could become. Wura stepped out with Abio by her side, raising her hand to the crowd. This time, the applause wasn't just for a contract, it was for the woman who had turned rejection into triumph. As she walked forward, she felt the weight of her past falling away completely. The little girl who had once been mocked, silenced, and overworked was gone. In her place stood a woman who had risen against all odds, carrying her scars not as shame, but as proof of her strength. And as the cameras followed her every step, Wura knew she had not only claimed her freedom, but also inspired a generation to believe in their own power.